story, and I'm joined by Amnesty International's Deputy Regional Director, Khanyo Farisè. Khanyo, a good afternoon to you. Happy New Year, of course, and thank you so much for joining us. Let's start off with Amnesty International's reaction to the news of Zimbabwe abolishing the death penalty.
Thank you, Naledi, for having us. So we are really pleased. As Amnesty, we are very pleased as an organization which opposes the death penalty. Absolutely. We are very happy to see that this historic decision has been made in Zimbabwe. And we hope that the country will follow through to fully abolish the death penalty and that other countries in the region will follow suit. Indeed, this is a historic moment in Zimbabwe. We've been campaigning since 1977 for the abolition of the death penalty globally. And at the time we started, there weren't even international treaties which specifically called for the abolition of the death penalty. In Zimbabwe in particular, for more than 12 years, Amnesty, working with stakeholders in the country, have been working, campaigning against the death penalty. So globally, about 113 countries have abolished the death penalty, and Zimbabwe is now the 24th country in the region. So this is a very important decision that has been made in Zimbabwe.
Is that the 24th in Africa, on the continent, right?
Yes, in the region, in the African region.
You know, it's very interesting because it is one of those very divisive sort of conversations, right, about just the impact of the death penalty and how it actually does or doesn't change crime rates in a country. So, I mean, let's talk a little bit about that. Does it actually work?
So, firstly, it's very important that Zimbabwe has made this decision because it puts Zimbabwe's domestic law in line with international commitments that it's made. In 2023, for example, our report documented 59 people who were on death row, and as it stands, there were about 62 people. And we have consistently opposed the death penalty in all cases without exception. And we've said this because it violates the right to life, it violates the right to human dignity, it is the ultimate cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment. But also to your point about whether or not it works, we found also that in cases where there's been a miscarriage of justice or a failure of the justice system, it is absolutely irreversible. And it's also, we found in our research that it disproportionately is used against racial and ethnic minorities in some cases, and it's also in some cases used as a tool for political repression. So there is evidence that there are alternatives to killing people as a way of solving crime issues. Government needs to shift to more prevention-focused and rehabilitation approaches with the human rights mindset, rather than resorting to killing people, as opposed to actually spending time and money working on prevention and rehabilitation.
Yeah, there's also the issue around just how transparent countries are around how many people actually do end up facing the death penalty, and we can, if you can, please talk a little bit to us about that. I mean, we're hearing here with Zim that in 20 years no one has been hanged, but what is happening with other countries, and do we have that data, or are there countries that simply just aren't coming forward around how many people are put to death?
So what is clear is that there is an overwhelming amount of countries who have moved to abolishing the death penalty. And it's very clear that there's an ever-increasing isolation of countries who still persist with the death penalty. For example, in our 2023 report, we saw that it was in fact, globally, very few countries went through with death penalties or executions, rather, as opposed to countries that didn't. So there's an ever-increasing isolation of those who continue with it. We're seeing that even though there's not enough data, but it's clear that most countries are moving away from this kind of punishment, recognizing that it has no place in our society right now. And those few that still continue with these executions are really becoming extremely isolated. We even saw countries like Ghana, Kenya, Liberia introducing bills which seek to move away from this cruel, inhumane, and degrading form of treatment.
Yeah, there is something to be looked at here with the decision by Zimbabwe, though, and perhaps you can help us understand this, that there is a new provision in the Defence Act introduced by the Death Penalty Abolition Act of 2024 that allows for the reinstatement, and I'm reading from a piece here, of the death penalty when any state or public emergency is declared in terms of Section 113 of the Constitution. So it seems there is some sort of loophole there where the Zim government does allow the reinstatement in special cases.
Indeed, Naledi, as you've put it, there is a provision that allows that in cases of a declaration of state of public emergency, the death penalty can be reinstated until such time as that situation or public emergency has stopped. But that needs to be repealed. So that the country gets to a place where it has fully abolished the death penalty. We also know that the Constitution of Zimbabwe does provide that a law can provide for the death penalty. So that provision in the Constitution also creates a window for possible reintroduction of the death penalty. But what is clear in Zimbabwe is that the country has made it clear that this kind of punishment has no place in Zimbabwe. So we do believe that the government will follow through with the complete abolition of the death penalty in this particular act, but also closing this loophole within the Constitution, which could open a window for the reintroduction of the death penalty.
Yeah, but overall, I think before I let you go, just as a closing thought, you've got the Justice Minister in Zim who's described this as more than just a legal reform, but a statement of commitment to justice and humanity, a step in the right direction for, of course, there's the terming that's been used now, decolonizing the justice system in Zimbabwe.
Indeed, we applaud the decision of Zimbabwe to abolish the death penalty. It was the right decision. It's indeed a beacon of hope for the region. Countries like Botswana, for example, which still retain this punishment, should also look at this decision and follow suit and actually go ahead and abolish the death penalty. It's very clear that there's a correlation in a lot of cases between poverty and the use of the death penalty. There's a disproportionate use against particular groups and it's used for political repression in some cases. It's a grossly violative form of punishment which has no place in our world today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for speaking to us. We really do appreciate your time. Khanyo Farisè, who is the Deputy Regional Director for Amnesty